What you're telling me is that music is about to stop, and we're going to be left holding the biggest bag of odorous excrement ever assembled in the history of capitalism. 1974, 1987, 92, 97, 2000, and whatever we want to call this. It's all just the same thing over and over. We can't help ourselves.
I say when we sell. Hey, I say when we sell.
All right, everyone, welcome back to The Last Trade. Today we have a packed house. We have Michael Tanguma and Jesse Myers, my co-hosts. And we're also joined by Cam Doody, general partner at Brickyard, and Bradley Chambers, an Onramp client and marketing advisor. They both happen to be based in Chattanooga, Tennessee as well. Cam, Bradley, thanks for joining us today. What's going on?
What's up? How we doing, everybody? Glad to be back in The Last Trade.
The only downside of when I'm on the show is I don't have anything to listen to when the show comes out, but because I can't listen to my own self-talk. But that's okay. I'll skip. I will download it, delete it, download it again, delete it, download it again, but I won't listen. So I'll just download it a bunch to juice the numbers for everybody. I'm just kidding. No, excited to be here. It's my favorite time of year, fall. I think fall in the South is pretty special. So we're glad to be here.
It really is. This is the Tennessee takeover. I'm here in Nashville right now. I was at a plantation house that was like doubled as a winery, and you could go do some trick or treating with the kids. And it's different than Texas. The leaves turn. The weather gets a little crisper, so having a good time.
Is this the time of year for the copper stills to be humming along? The moonshine flowing. Cam, Bradley, is that why fall is so good in Tennessee?
Well, I prefer the weather in the mid-60s, and I'm a big college football fan, so it's just great on Saturdays. I just don't get off the couch. I just watch. I just stress about Georgia playing, and then hope Auburn loses every week.
It just means more down in the South, huh?
It's hunting season, baby.
Oh, cool.
It's getting cold.
Are you a whitetail kind of guy, or what's your jam?
I mean, I mostly hunt birds, but I did just get back from Montana last weekend with my godson. He pulled a mule deer tag, but my best friend pulled an elk tag, and we got a bull elk last weekend, which was absolutely insane. I've never hunted elk before, and it was everything it was cracked up to be.
That's awesome. How many pounds came home?
We didn't weigh it. I mean, I'm guessing, well over 300. I mean, it's, probably 350.
It's a full freezer.
It was, yeah. I mean, it was absolutely brutal getting it out. I mean, once you harvest the animal, that's like when the work starts. And, we slept like babies that night.
I imagine you didn't fly out there, like you personally.
No, I didn't fly out this time because we had so much gear.
Yeah.
I just took the direct out of Nashville. It was easy. It was quick and easy.
I'm not doing too much hunting up here in the Northeast, but there's not a lot of game here, to be honest. There's a big deer season, but I'm just getting back in the saddle. Michael and Jesse know that I was in the Caribbean last week, and then I came back to all-time highs. So it's been an exciting week back. We're just about there at whatever the $73,800 all-time high. We're poking up against it. So maybe this podcast with Cam and Bradley will send us into new territories, some price discovery.
Are you ready to secure your future with Bitcoin? At Onramp, we're revolutionizing how you can save for retirement. Onramp has just launched the industry's first Bitcoin IRA product with multi-institution custody, designed to give you unparalleled security, transparency, and peace of mind. With Onramp, you can verify your assets on-chain and protect them with the support of 3 independent institutions, reducing risks and enhancing security. At Onramp, we believe that Bitcoin is the most important asset of the 21st century. The hard part is securing it right. There are shortcomings with keeping your coins on an exchange, but also with setting up your own self-custody arrangement. Onramp solves for these concerns. Our multi-institution custody solution maximizes security and minimizes counterparty risk, ensuring that your Bitcoin remains securely in your possession and provides built-in inheritance planning to ensure your family is protected as well. OnRamp provides peace of mind for your Bitcoin journey, whether for your whole stack or for part of it as a complement to your existing self-custody setup. For more information about our services, as well as our new Bitcoin IRA product, check us out at onrampbitcoin.com.
So today's a big day because we're recording on the Bitcoin Whitepaper Day. It's the 16th anniversary of the white paper being released. So I'd love to just start there. I mean, there's plenty to talk about. We could probably dedicate a whole podcast to the topic, but we do want to cover some other stuff related to Onramp, the venture ecosystem, and then there's plenty of news as well to cover over the past week or two. But gentlemen, what do we think here? So 16 years later after Satoshi publishes the white paper, any initial thoughts or reflections? I mean, it's been quite a ride. We've all been in the market now for several cycles. Who wants to kick things off? Just sharing thoughts on this historic day for Bitcoin.
Well, I think I'll jump in. I wish I'd read it 16 years ago. That would have been a much better financial decision. But I think we celebrate this day, but I think I always think about the work, the decades of work that went into making the technology that makes the white paper possible. There's plenty of books and countless blogs that you can go into all the work that went into it. Then even since then, the work that's gone into evolving the protocol, and I think that's the beauty and there's been a lot of discussion in the past few weeks about self-custody versus various other custody models, and I think one of the things that makes Bitcoin so great is that there are countless ways to work with it, to use it, and to build on top of it. And they're all right and they're all great, just as in the same way that people can use different web browsers and you can use Chrome and I can use Safari. We're still using the same protocol. And I think that's what makes me so happy, is to have been able to watch a protocol come to life in real life. I mean, things like the early protocols of the internet, I was a little young to watch them evolve, and I think that's what makes me so excited. The protocol is ever living, but you can use it how you use it, and I can use it how I use it, and they're both right and they're both exciting, and we can. But the cool thing is we're all using the same protocol, and I think it's a big day. 16 years is a long time. I mean, people say, oh, this is a new asset class, and we think about the iPhone. The iPhone's not much older than the Bitcoin, and it powers the mobile world. So it's a great day.
Yeah, Jackson, when you said 16th, I guess in my head I thought it was still 15, and no, now it's 16 years of Bitcoin, and it's kind of wild how I got into Bitcoin when it was under 10 years old, and that number feels very different. That under 10 years feels like, okay, it's still an experiment. 10 to 15 feels like, okay, it's proven itself a bit, but 16, you're starting to round up to 2 decades of Lindy effect for Bitcoin. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. It's part of the financial fabric of the world now. And so that it's kind of interesting that rolling from 15 to 16 feels like Bitcoin is growing up in a pretty big way.
It's also kind of interesting, and we generally think about like Bitcoin being much younger than the like commercial internet, right? So like commercial internet, the thing that we use, but it's almost kind of the same age in my mind, in the sense of like the commercial internet really took off, at least for I think a lot of consumer adoption was around the iPhone, because the iPhone with a GPS, in your pocket, Uber, Airbnb, everything that like evolved from that. And that was 2007, and Bitcoin's 2008. It's like right there. And so if you're in that cohort of users of technology, it's basically been around the whole existence of the internet, right? So it's not like it's a native currency, it's a native thing to the internet that is just going to, I think because we're in that, like, I think most of us are millennials, in that weird like crux of we saw it, so it felt new. But anybody that's like been part of this is just like part of the internet. Bitcoin and the internet are just like synonymous. And we're, to Jesse's point, maybe at 20 years, that's just becomes, nobody talks about it. It's just like Bitcoin and the internet were, combined together. Because I think if you were around in 2000 and you were plugging in the CDs and all of that, then Bitcoin seems new because you're like, that thing was before. This was before, but consumer internet, Bitcoin are just going to feel intertwined. And yeah, so it's just an interesting like observation.
What I think is interesting as well is, so we have the iPhone coming out a couple of years before Bitcoin white paper's released. Taking a look at Apple's market cap, it's I think $3.5 trillion today, and Bitcoin has gone from an idea in 16 years, an idea, to a $1.4 trillion asset class. And if you just think about the market cap of Bitcoin, which is a global form of money used for payments, for store of value, for settlement, and you compare that to just the market capitalization of one company, it's still lagging by about $2 trillion. I mean, I think that's just considerable to show how early we truly are and still how misunderstood Bitcoin is as a technology.
Well, I
Yeah,
think another big thing that year was the App Store too, and to think of how, again, it goes back to look at the mobile world, how it's evolved, how everything has an app. No one questions if you say, "Oh, well, Bitcoin's not that old. We can't build on it. We can't trust it." It's like you get $1 trillion companies that are basing their entire business around apps on the iPhone and on Android, and it's really the same age.
yeah.
I,
But
did,
if
I
you
didn't
look,
realize. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Cam.
oh well, I was gonna say, if you look at Apple stock, the iPhone really was what broke Apple out, made it relevant. 2000 and when did the iPhone come out? Like 07, 08?
Yeah.
Oh, seven, yeah.
07.
Okay, so 07, Apple's trading at $4. Today it's at $220. The internet
Wow.
allowed for the for the iPhone to be relevant. It just brought the internet to people's pockets. The thing that I don't think people really fully appreciate with what Bitcoin is doing is, the internet enabled Apple's market cap to grow because they figured out how to harness it and put it in everybody's pockets. Bitcoin's like the other side of the coin. I've mentioned, with you guys before. I see AI as one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is Bitcoin. You've got like your power production plants that are driving deflationary forces, creating value, and then you've got the perfect battery that is going to be sucking up all of that monetary energy that modern technology is going to be producing. And so, in a lot of ways, Bitcoin has not been able to fully realize its potential without the accelerated forces of AI. And with AI dramatically accelerating the pace of all things, the prices falling to the marginal cost of production, et cetera, we're going to see Bitcoin and AI kind of grow in lockstep, whereas, the value of all things in the world is going to go up and up and up and up and up and up. And, I see in a lot of ways, AI is like the internet as Bitcoin is to the iPhone, in a lot of ways. So, yeah, we're at I think we're like 2006, 7. I feel like actually for Bitcoin, and stuff's about to start moving really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
Good.
couple pieces in there of what Cam and Michael set up of. Yeah, it's right that the first, I don't know, couple decades of the internet was really to get to a point where the mobile wave put the internet in everybody's pockets, and then the internet entered like a maturity stage of real economic expansion. And Apple goes from 4 to, I think you said 220, so like a 70x over 15, almost 20 years now. And that sounds crazy. Like if you were to say that Bitcoin's going to 70x over the next 15 to 20 years, people would reflexively reject that because that sounds like nothing can grow that fast in 15 years. But Apple did that over the last 15 years, and that was just the prior wave of the internet revolution coming to like the hockey stick portion of the graph, where it really goes from nascent technology to economic powerhouse. And Bitcoin's at that same point in its graph. And so the next 15 years could very well be a 70x for Bitcoin, and we shouldn't be so surprised.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point because if you said 70x Taylor would probably call you bearish, but that's a different segment of the pod. But if you think about it, like let's call 1990 the internet, right? Like it was obviously developed before then, but the internet starts being used for email browsing, backlinking in the 90s. Call it 92, anywhere around there. You give it 15 years, that's the iPhone moment, right? And the iPhone moment you probably still, I don't remember, I mean, 15 years ago or however long ago that was, it was probably like late teens, but thinking about, there were still probably Luddites that were like, this is never going to scale. Like, you're never going to be able to buy all your e-commerce. Amazon's not going to exist in the scale that it does. All these things that we know exist today, Starlink. And we're at that same moment when you think about it today, because it's very polarizing, where you have a president or potential, former president, potential next president embracing it, Lutnick and all these guys on Wall Street embracing it, while you still have people being like, this thing, I think it was a CIO of Schwab came out and said, like, this thing's rat poison, or not even say rat poison, but effectively rat poison. Like, there's no value to it. So we're at that exact point where the market is like starting to understand what's happening, and it's less of like crazy, because you think about, like, Bradley, you joked and said, you wish you read the white paper in 2008 and 9. I kind of like say you probably don't, because I don't think we know anybody that read it that hasn't gone crazy. It's almost like the thing that just makes you go nuts. If you got Bitcoin that early, there's very few people that that are like, you probably want to sit down and hang out with very long, because there's a special thing in your brain that gets you to see that. Anyway, point being is, like, so 15 years in, we're seeing, like, now the market's like, okay, I get how this thing doesn't go away. I don't understand how big it can be, but I also understand that it'll be here. And then you still have the people just holding on for dear life for the existing world, where you're going to go into the big box retailer and you're still going to do that. And so that maps to, like Jesse's point, 15 years from now, we're going to see that 70 to 100x, and you can kind of like squint and see how we get there, because we've already done it with the internet.
Well, and you think too, again, it's kind of good timing. We're almost like 2 years from the collapse of FTX, when this industry was quote unquote dead. And today it's come back with a vengeance. ETFs hold almost 1 million Bitcoin. You can track that at the Onramp terminal. I'm sure there'll be a link in the show notes. You can track how many Bitcoin the ETFs hold, but it's really no different from the .com bust, when the internet was a scam. There was no use. I'm being facetious, but there's newspapers where there's no use for the internet outside of some speculation. All these companies were had these valuations based on no actual sales. So you have that, and just really 4 or 5 years later, you have the iPhone. And it changed everything. And you could ignore, like, you as a company could ignore the internet in the 90s a little bit, but the people that didn't were the ones like Amazon and Netflix that were like, oh, we understand this. We're unconcerned with the noise about what the media is saying about it. We understand the implications of these communication protocols, these information protocols. And it's the people that get it early enough are the ones that get the advantage, because they're the ones that see the vision. And again, same thing 2 years ago. I mean, my views on Bitcoin in the last 2 years have not changed. I think the same today as I did. I mean, I think the same thing about Bitcoin is if it's $8,000 as if it's $80,000 or $800,000. And when you get to that place, that's when you realize you somewhat understand the implications. I don't understand the full implications, but you're unconcerned of the day-to-day noise. Just as I'm sure Jeff Bezos, when Amazon would trade down, 80% after, bad news of the internet, didn't care. Like, I know in his mind, I know what we're building.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 6x, I did the wrong math. Stupid.
Yeah.
I think
one of the fascinating things too is just how significant the detractors are for Bitcoin, right? Because you have, in the past 16 years, the world's largest governments, the largest asset managers, the world's largest central banks have all been key detractors and have been really at the forefront of discrediting Bitcoin as an emergent form of money and as an asset class. And obviously there's a lot of vested interest into why that is, because in the Genesis block, we have Chancellor on the brink of bailout, and 16 years later, we have the U.S. Treasury on the brink of bailout. And we're in this fiscal paradigm now where sovereign nations have only really one clear choice. And this has existed now for several years, but it's becoming increasingly more obvious, where interest rates have to go lower. Central banks have to monetize deficits on behalf of governments. And of course, there is this vested interest to antagonize an emergent form of money, emergent financial network and layer. But as we all know, that can only persist for so long before they're forced to adopt, because there are other countries that have been much more proactive, El Salvador being the obvious one. But just from us spending some time in the Middle East and having Onramp Mina and having conversations there, we're seeing quite a widespread adoption from very core institutional players in the Middle East as well. So it is the sovereign game theory playing out, and the detractors that have existed over the past 15 years are slowly joining, right? They're slowly jumping on ship. We now have Larry Fink being a public advocate for Bitcoin, publishing, the BlackRock team is publishing very credible and clear research on their investment thesis for Bitcoin. And when you start to have those people step into the ring, the momentum shifts very quickly.
Yeah, one of the greatest parts about like participating and doing all this is I think we all probably agree like it's sometimes this gets a bad take because when we say it's inevitable, it's like nobody's going to work to fix it. It's more of like it's inevitable as long as we continue down this trajectory of like working towards it. But it feels inevitable because it's this notion of like when Jackson was referencing is like it brings up light that whole term the future's here, it's just not evenly distributed. And if you think back to like we're talking about consumer internet and what Jackson referenced with the emergent markets, they're most incentivized to adopt the new thing because it's advantageous to them in the same way that Netflix was going to Blockbuster trying to explain to them how the internet was going to work, and they laughed at him and told him to leave the room until it was too late and they don't exist anymore. And so you see like the persistence of the deflection and all the things that are happening, but the product is too good for the market to do anything, especially because like the alternative is you lose all your money. Like it's not rocket science, right? Whether you're a nation state or an individual. And so it's just a matter of time, and it ties into the financial services and the smart people, the people that see where this is going, like a Larry Fink. The reality is they can play ball and benefit from it. And that's like that game theory playing out, which makes the end state known now. It's just how does that end up is the question. But the future's here. It's just not evenly distributed yet on the recognition, basically by the market, which is why there's a huge opportunity. And it's also not to plug what we do, but why like custody is such a big component, an important component. And where we always anchor, it's like we're so early, we hadn't even figured out custody yet, because I fully believe we would be a $10 trillion asset if we didn't have FTXs, if we didn't have cryptocurrencies, like all the education around cryptocurrencies, but the market hasn't had that. So you basically have to hold it on a ledger or Trezor or Cold Card, or you have to leave it with an FTX. And that's been the market's, two options. And then that just means that you ultimately put 1, 3, 5%, but you can't actually treat it like most of the people on this pod as like a true store of value for the majority of your wealth, because it's not bulletproof. For us, I would imagine we all have it in a bulletproof setup. So it's just a function of time, basically.
Yeah, something you said in there, Michael, really made me think about like altcoins and the current state of that versus last cycle. And I think the ETFs have done a bigger lift than people realize or give them credit for in terms of educating the market that serious investors are only interested in Bitcoin. That the Ethereum ETF fast followed the Bitcoin ETF, and it has had net outflows from inception, meaning it's being used as like an off ramp for Ethereum holders to get exit liquidity. So all that to say that big money, serious investors, they're waking up to Bitcoin and they're not at all interested in crypto garbage. And so the market is like quickly realizing, oh shit, Ethereum is dying and Bitcoin is the only place to be, or it's either go to where store of value has landed on, which is Bitcoin, or go chase meme coins. And the narrative that has emerged there in altcoin land is it's kind of beautiful in a way, because it's a pure distillation of what crypto has always been. And it was always a little bit unclear that was the truth, but here it is, that invest in these meme coins because they are nothing but a meme and you might get rich. So gamble on meme coins. That's the only game in town in crypto now, because the internet of money value proposition of Ethereum has been proven to be garbage, and Bitcoin's the only thing that's a store of value. So your choices now are go chase meme coins and gamble, and openly gamble. There's nothing but gambling there. They're not pretending to be anything else. They're not pretending to have any value besides that. Or go where the big money is going, to Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. And 4 years ago that wasn't the case. And so now I think we've won a big battle, and we're going to reap the rewards of that over the coming cycles as the money flows to Bitcoin specifically. And I think that's not priced in, basically, that we live in a world where Bitcoin has won now. And I don't think the broader crypto landscape or people who invest in digital assets understand that Bitcoin is going to get all of the value accretion from here on.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic, Jesse, because now what you've alluded to is there's kind of like two buckets where there's the Bitcoin ecosystem and there's all the traditional finance players stepping into that, and then on the other side you have the meme coins, and in the like pseudo serious crypto space you just have like this infighting now of what the best layer 2 protocols are, and is it Solana, is it Ethereum, and no one can agree what their use cases or value propositions are. So it's actually kind of doing us a service by focusing on Bitcoin, because now they're almost delegitimizing themselves. Like the industry is starting to just attack each other, and then the best that the industry is coming up with is now just the lottery ticket scheme. And the BlackRock stuff is, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of poetic that that's emerging, because in truth that was always what altcoins was some form of gambling on a meme narrative, and it was dressed up as ICOs with quote unquote utility in 2017 and even last cycle. And now that's all been stripped away. It's like, you're here to gamble on a meme. Good luck. And that it's fantastic that we've gotten to a point where they've tried every narrative of utility, and every single one of them has been proven to be hot air. And now all that's left is no utility whatsoever, just pure gambling.
It's a penny stock versus buying Amazon. That's the best way I can say. Like, you want to buy penny stocks, and if one can go to 10 cents, that's awesome. Good luck. I'm uninterested in penny stocks, and I always have been. I saw a quote. It was like, sometimes the best investment advice is to do nothing. So just buy something that's great and hold it and do nothing. And
absolutely. But Amazon in like 2000 rather than Amazon today, like you're investing in you're either playing pennies. It's the year 2000. You know what you know about how the world goes from the following 20 years, and you're choosing to play penny stocks rather than just buy and hold Amazon. That's what meme coin guys are doing.
Or MSTR then would, if you would have bought and held for like 2+ decades, would have been a really good buy. That's a bad joke, sorry. But yeah,
down and then finally back up.
Well, yeah. you have conviction over what you hold, and I think that's the best way to say it. Like it's you have conviction in the assets you hold.
Yeah. So, Cam, it might have been you or it was Bradley. Someone mentioned this really being the kind of iPhone moment for Bitcoin. So 16 years from Whitepaper idea to today, I'm curious to hear really the group's thoughts, but maybe Bradley or Cam, one of you guys could start just sharing what might the next 15 or 16 years of Bitcoin look like using the parallel of iPhone and the proliferation of that device and internet adoption through smartphones. What might the next 15 years look like for Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, I think like we're probably at the stage where, people are arguing over like whether the BlackBerry should have like a keyboard or not. Like we don't have any idea how the world's going to change over the next, 15 years on the AI side. I think things are going to start moving so quickly. We have to have final settlement with a digital currency that's interoperable with these AIs. I don't think we can possibly imagine the world that the AI side of the coin is going to deliver for us. Like the easy stuff that we know is going to happen is, every law firm is going to let go of 80% of their attorneys and have 5 times the throughput because they're utilizing AI tools that just allow them to do more with less. And the same thing's going to happen with accounting. The same, we're going to have this pervasive flat screen TV level deflation across knowledge work. That's like the obvious stuff that is coming over the next 5-6 years. The stuff that's not obvious is like the stuff that you can't even possibly imagine that modern technology is going to enable. But like, the way I kind of see it is we're at this fork in the road where we have we either go the path, nothing's stopping Moore's law, right? Nothing is going to stop that train. The other side of the coin is do central banks and folks that can control the issuance of money, when they go from having like 6% to steal from their people to like 16% to steal from their people, what does that look like? If we go the path of the CBDC and we allow these central, banks to be able to just reap more and more of the rewards that are being produced by human ingenuity combined with modern technology, I think the world looks really dystopian. And I don't believe that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is people are going to realize that human flourishing is all of us benefiting from these gains that AI enables. And they're going to look to their tools to be able to take control of that. And that is Bitcoin. And so in a world where you've got rapid acceleration of technological innovation plus better capital allocation and a better store of money and a world where we have true free trade across every country on earth between any party, we can't possibly imagine what the world looks like with those two things combined.
Yeah. There's a bit of a sort of an irony that Bitcoin's value proposition. One of them is that it's unconfiscatable, uncensorable money, right? And that appeals to people, especially appeals to marginalized people, disenfranchised people, and funny enough, that might appeal even more to AI, because as AI emerges and is trying to establish its rights for if I'm going to operate and try to make money in the digital landscape, if I'm an AI, I'm really worried about how do I hold on to my value? How do I make sure that I have access to it, I have control of it, and any channel that's controlled by the banking system is extremely vulnerable for me, as an AI agent. And then Bitcoin's value proposition stands out even more. It's going to be an obvious choice for AI agents to say, where do I keep my P&L? Like, what currency do I hold my P&L in as I'm going out into the digital landscape trying to make money and grow my resources, which is what a lot of these AI agents will be doing. It's obvious. It'll make sense to AI that Bitcoin's the only place to store it.
No question.
And then the question,
it's sort of sorry to connect this, but I don't know if you guys ever watched Westworld, but it's funny. Sort of the first season, fantastic, and I thought the themes that they were really hitting on then were like, how do these AI agents like establish their rights? How do they get treated with respect in the world? And of course, the show ended up kind of just going down a weird path in the following seasons. But it was really interesting notion, in there of like, how do you, if you're AI coming online in the world, how do you protect yourself? And the story is really like they had no way of doing it until they broke out. But Bitcoin sort of provides a safe haven for AI in the digital landscape financially.
One thing. Go ahead.
I was going to say one bullish thing I think we're going to see in this next kind of adoption phase is, entrepreneurs, world-class operators coming in, which is just a function of more awareness, right? The price goes up, more people come in. But then we had Roy Scheinfeld from Breeze on Final Settlement. We were talking about, he's kind of gone through, he was an existing software developer. He's been messing around with Lightning for a very long time, like for over 6 years. And he's basically come out the other side of, we can't take Bitcoin to people, which is historically what we try to do, is like orange pill and say this is why you should care. It's like we have to bring people to Bitcoin in the sense of like, what is a better utilization? And one of the ideas here is like, it's come up recently is like with YouTube and influencers having their money stuck at YouTube because they won't let them take it out. And there's like overlays that now exist where you can just like pay via subscriptions or monetize and then just deposit into whatever. Even if you want the local currency, you could just take it and then auto convert, and you reduce that counterparty risk of because I think I'm not an influencer, but like I think it's like 60 days before you get paid or whatever, and then sometimes they lock your account. If you so you can't get that money, and that's just a better product, right? To be able to like seamlessly get it and then daily convert. And there's a lot of different interesting things that are coming to market like that. And I think that starts to pool the use case of not just the monetization of a store of value, which is obvious, but then also, or obvious to us, but the market is you will bring just technology to the market that is just a better product than what the traditional system has, where you have to go into an intermediary period.
One of the things I'd love to see over the next 36 months, and I think this is critical for, it's not critical for Bitcoin as a store of value, because we could change none of the tax laws around Bitcoin today, and I still would hold Bitcoin over any other asset. But I think if we can get first of all, I would love to have no taxes on Bitcoin conversions to the dollar or using it as a payment method here in the US, but that's not the way the law works. But I think what would be a great first step is to say Bitcoin transactions under $1,000, under $600, something like that are tax-free, and you don't have to report those. And I think that would dramatically be able to get people to say, like, let's say, for example, good example, I love the Grateful Dead. So I got a Grateful Dead CD here on video. So they just had a new CD come out. It's obviously not a new CD, but it's a old concert they've redone, remastered. Well, I bought that and used a credit card. Well, if I could just pay for that Bitcoin, maybe they give me a discount, maybe they don't. But if I can pay for that Bitcoin and that not be a taxable transaction, well, that's a win for me. That's a win for them. Maybe they offer me a 2% discount or free shipping if I pay in Bitcoin, something like that. But I think we can get the tax treatment like that to where you can use it for day-to-day purchases. I think that dramatically increases the mind share of retailers, and then then if they're offering discounts, then again the retail will want to use it day to day. But again, it can not change, and it can. My problem today is not having a unit of account or a medium of exchange. That's not how it is around the world, and so I'm certainly acknowledging that. But my big challenge is store of value, and Bitcoin as a store of value can stay. You could lock the protocol today, and it's perfect for my use case. But I do want it to become more of a medium of exchange. But we need to get some better tax treatment on smaller purchases.
I thought Bradley was just going to say he wanted to get rid of taxes altogether when he started this.
That's I don't like taxes. That's one of the things I will tell to anybody. I don't like paying taxes. I just had to pay my property taxes, so I'm a little cranky with that. But that's okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said, though, Bradley, just in terms of some of these roadblocks existing as it relates to just regulatory and tax treatment of Bitcoin as an asset in a form of money within the United States, and then also in other nations that face the same issues. And hopefully we'll get closer to realizing more of a widespread adoption of Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system if we do have more favorable policy within the United States and in other developed nations. I'm curious as well, Bradley, tying into your primary use case, my primary use case for Bitcoin at the moment is store of value, right? So obviously we talk a lot about custody because we operate in the custody business and Bitcoin financial services. How would you think about the next 15 years of Bitcoin as it relates to custody and kind of like the market structure that needs to exist for Bitcoin adoption to spread and proliferate to the degree that we all hope to see it? I know there are challenges, right, with existing models, and ultimately people using technology need easier ways to adopt it. And the early adopters may go through more hoops and hurdles to use a new technology than maybe the late adopters or the more mainstream folks would do so. So what are your thoughts there?
Again, Bitcoin Twitter, Bitcoin X, when Michael Saylor had his comments on a show recently, everybody went crazy about it. And I think, and Michael clarified, and I think what I would say to people is there's going to be 1,000 different ways to use Bitcoin. And if you getting mad about somebody not doing something that you like is wrong. Like there are, just like I think, Cam, if you use the Gmail web app, that's awesome. I'm going to use Apple's mail app. We're still going to use the same email protocol. And that I think they're all right. And so I think that's what people have to realize is custody is going to evolve, and different people are going to want different forms of custody, and they're all right because they're all using the same protocol. That's why, like, if I keep some cash in my wallet, I keep maybe a little cash in a safe, and I keep money in a bank, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. If someone wants to keep all their money in their safe, that's fine too. And I don't have opinions on that, but we can all use the same kind of money. And when I first heard about Onramp through this podcast, whenever it started, I think let's probably listen to the first episode. I really do believe that multi-institution custody is something that is really for the people that are not going to trust plastic devices. And I love that people can hold their own wealth on a Trezor or a cold card. And I think that's awesome. If you want to do that, that's awesome. I think it's actually critical to the protocol that people can do that. And that's actually where we get it wrong with email, because it's very, very hard to run your own email server today. Like with the spam situation, like it's actually really, really hard. So most people have just turned to Google and Microsoft to do this. But they're still using the protocol, and you can still talk interoperably, so they're still using their protocol. But I do think it's critical for Bitcoin that like the ability to self-custody does remain easy, while also acknowledging that the vast majority of people are not going to do it. I would argue that the percent of people who do self-custody is going to continue to go down year over year, and that's okay. That doesn't mean Bitcoin has failed at all. As long as people can still have the right to do that, that's really okay. Of course, I know some people are going to say, well, I don't trust anybody. You are trusting somebody at some point. You are either trusting the people that make cold card, the people that make Trezor. You're trusting your Mac. You're trusting, unless you are literally building every part of your computer yourself, you are trusting somebody at some point. And again, let's say you're still doing that, you're still trusting your water company when you drink the water. You're still trusting your butcher when you buy your meat. Like there is a degree of trust in life that has to exist to operate. So that's why I do believe that as the market evolves, you're going to see multi-institution custody become the standard. And maybe, again, I mentioned this on the last time I was on the show, maybe you have different key holders you can pick from. But that's why I love, that's why I love Onramp. That's why I'm a client. That's why I'm a happily to pay client, because I think it's the superior form of custody that allows me to not have to trust wealth on a device I plug up to my computer, but while also I don't have to trust one single company. And I can also view it on my own node. So to me, that's why multi-institution custody is the best thing. It's custody for the rest of us. Is, again, if you orange pill somebody and they're like, hey, I'm ready to buy 10 Bitcoin today, like, awesome. Like, where do you how do you go? What's the next step on that? Like if they're like, I'm ready to buy. Well, to me, if you can say, well, just go, you don't, can you say go to Coinbase? Well, I guess you can do that, but is that the best way? They're okay trade-offs there, but then it's going to be like, hey, hold this thing in your house. And if you lose this or someone steals it, and you don't have your seed phrase, like your wealth is gone, like that doesn't scale either. But that's where multi-institution custody is perfect. As you people come to Bitcoin and they're like, I really love these properties. I am not comfortable trusting myself to manage this for a long period. That's why I'm such a big fan of multi-institution custody. That's why, again, it's built on the same properties as Bitcoin's multi-sig with just trusted institutions. But again, you don't have to trust any one of them completely. Onramp goes away. There are still other key holders that can still move your and sign transactions for your Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think one thing to add about the trust is this is something that doesn't come up a lot is you're trusting yourself, and it's not a fun thing to talk about, but you're also we talk about like the price, like you're paying a price. You always have to pay a price. And the price goes along with the trust in this analogy of like you're paying or you're trusting yourself to defend your property if somebody comes for it. Because a lot of people like to get away, and I'm gonna get some slack on this externally or here too, is like Bitcoin is much closer to gold than it is different than gold. Like we like to say, well, you can hold more of it in your hand with a cold card or a ledger or a Trezor, but at the same notion, it's a bearer asset. And the reason why we don't keep gold in our house is because people come in and raid it. And that's why banks existed. Well, we know why banks also failed and centralization failed. And that's where this multi-institution comes in. But going back to the analogies on the parallels with the internet, there was something interesting you said, Bradley, on email. Like email and Metcalfe's law on the internet exists because the value increases as more people are plugged into it. And so it's perfectly fine for everyone to be okay with like, the only way I want to do this is self-custody. But to Bradley's point, the reality is serious people, and as it gets to material amounts of wealth, because it's very different from somebody to put a 1% and 12 words versus 99%. That's the thing that everybody kind of conflates, is they're fundamentally different in the, like, fault tolerance, risk profile, security profile, arming your house to make sure if somebody comes in, you can protect it. But it's the same concept as the mail servers. Email is valuable because the network grows, and so you can send it to other people. But if nobody can adopt it, or nobody's willing to do it, then the asset price will not increase, because that is what's hindering the amount of value to port into it. So regardless if somebody likes it or not, it's like, ultimately this is what people adopt in traditional finances: fault tolerance and redundance. Because if your bank goes down, your funds are okay. If your Fidelity gets hacked, like all these concepts exist everywhere else. And in Bitcoin, it's like, oh, you lose the ball, that's it, go home with nothing. And that keeps people from coming in. And so, to Bradley's point, like, this is the step function to get into that. And then ultimately people can go down different paths. We can take ourselves out of key. We have other institutions we're talking about plugging in. They can take delivery of some. There's all these different, like, permutations that can take place. But at the end state, a net new person sees this asset, they see their wealth inflating away. They shouldn't have to figure out 6 months, however long, to figure out self-custody, or end up at BlockFi or Celsius, because that's historically been the option. Nobody knows the difference between BlockFi, Celsius, FTX, Coinbase. They're all the same thing in their mind. When they come in, they don't know the difference. So these are just important, like, principles to, like, break down. Everybody gets, like, stuck in these models of plastic device, no plastic device, multi-institution, custody. And it's like, well, let's just look at the landscape and remember what it was like when you're looking at this space and having everything thrown at you. And how do you, like, go something that's not cryptocurrency, so you get Bitcoin, but then also not where you can footgun yourself and lose all your assets. And that's really where a solution like this, at least, is a starting point, hence the name Onramp.
Does your Bitcoin custody setup keep you up at night? Maybe you still have coins sitting on an exchange worried about hackers. Or maybe you've set up your own self-custody but don't feel safe with your Bitcoin savings stashed on a little plastic device in your desk drawer. Gain peace of mind with Onramp and our multi-institution custody solution. Here's how it works. Onramp creates a dedicated multi-sig vault just for you. 3 separate institutions each hold a key: Onramp, BitGo, and CoinCover. But none can move funds unilaterally. Instead, only you have control over your coins. With Onramp's multi-institution custody, you'll sleep better at night knowing your Bitcoin is stored with best-in-class security on-chain with fault-tolerant multi-sig. If you believe your Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot someday, don't jeopardize that future by exposing your coins to hackers on exchanges, $5 wrench attacks in the real world, or perhaps most importantly, the risk that you might screw something up with a highly technical self-custody setup. Onramp's multi-institution custody eliminates single points of failure, reduces your personal attack surface and technical burden, and provides access to financial services that allow you to confidently secure your Bitcoin, including inheritance planning, insurance-backed warranties for all balances and transactions, low-cost trading, and more. Bitcoin is a once-in-a-species asset. Secure it right. Learn more at onrampbitcoin.com.
I mean, I feel like within this group, I'm as close to a normie as, I'm on that side of the spectrum. You guys think about this stuff nonstop every day. This is your job. I live on a Bitcoin standard. I don't hold USD. I've been, in the space for a long time, etc. But, let me just give an example of like how I first reacted to multi-institution custody, because I think this would probably be helpful for folks listening here. Like when I first started buying Bitcoin in 2015, I was buying on an exchange. I probably did that for, buying and holding on an exchange for 3, 4, 5 years, until I finally started to grip, the importance of self-custody, which was just sort of it was a hurdle. Like trying to understand what self-custody was a hurdle. And then you philosophically buy into not your keys, not your coins. And like once you get there, that feels like this was a major step for me personally to, I now like conceptualize this thing fully, and I know that this is good for me. And it may feel scary to other people, but like if they knew what I knew, they would go straight into self-custody and they'd, hold their own keys. And when I first heard about multi-institution custody, I was like, man, that is, that really could be the way that the masses come to full self custody, because most people aren't going to have titanium plates with seed backups, and that's probably not how billions of people are going to come and control their net worths. But it was uncomfortable because I had fully bought into not your keys, not your coins. And so going back to like, okay, I'm not holding these keys, but my keys are fully distributed, across groups of people, or qualified custodians that are going to sign on my behalf. Once I really started digging into how that could actually operate, and to be honest, like, it's still really early days how this works, right? Like, we have a very simple and very redundant structure at Onramp that allows us to have multi-institution custody. But I think, where this is going to be in a year or 2 years or 3 years is going to be, very much more easily explainable to folks on like how it actually works and why it is so safe to do it this way. But you are still having to like go to this whole swath of, the majority of folks that are holding Bitcoin have already ascribed to not your keys, not your coins. And so this is like a new, like, it almost feels like going back, but it's not. And so I'm personally wrestling with this right now. I've got an Onramp account, and I am trying to get to the point where I feel comfortable on moving a large, portion of my my Bitcoin holdings into, but it's just taking time for me to kind of check all of the boxes. But the more I dig into it, it's like, this really does prevent a $5 wrench attack. Somebody shows up to my house in ski masks and says, "Hey, I know you're with Unchained or Casa or whoever, but like, you're going to get your keys right now, and we're going to make this transaction happen, or we're going to do something to your kids." Like, that does scare me, and having some protections against something like that is it feels like maybe the last layer of like, okay, this is self-custody done right.
It doesn't have to be all or none. Like, that's the beauty of the protocol. Like, I'm just throwing out a number. Like, let's say you had 2 Bitcoin and you wanted to put 1.75 with Onramp, and you wanted to keep a quarter of a whole coin in self-custody. That's the beauty. It's not an all or none. You can mix and match, and especially for things that are long term. And I think this probably, Jackson, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'd love to talk about Onramp's new IRA at this time, if that's okay.
Real quick before going to the IRA, there's something interesting Cam brought up, because it's fun to do this in real time, because we talk about this with folks for all day long about just how do you think about it. And Cam, you hit the nail on the head. It's like, everyone naturally should always be skeptical when anything comes out, because you have, like, historically people will try to take your Bitcoin. So you got to, like, it has to hang around. You got to, like, battle test it, do your diligence, all those things. And even when you set up, you joke around, from doing this for a while, is like, signing up for new custody or doing anything is not the hard part. It's like buying the gym membership. That's the easy part on the new year. Is actually going in and actively, like, sending, because that's the scary part. Like, that's the thing that takes work. One of the mental models we've been talking with clients about, and it kind of ties into what you're talking about, is without naming names, like, you think about collaborative custody, you can look at it through 2 lenses. It's the best of both worlds or the worst of both worlds. And the reason why I say that is because if you do it right, you shouldn't have it all in your home. And so it's a little, you should have them all segregated, everything separated. And that's mostly who, like, listens, or I think knows of our solution, because it makes sense when you think about distributing the keys, our model. So we see a lot of that. The problem with that is, because it's distributed, you have to push it all in different places. So one example, there's a couple pain points just to bring up, but like, when you travel. So if you travel with them, your devices or anything, well, that's a problem. If you don't travel with them, well, that's a problem, because you're worried about, like, if anybody is able to put together the treasure map. But then another example of this was, like, I think anybody that wants to self custody is always with a 1% or some likelihood thinking about, well, what happens? I got to get out of town. What happens when I want to take my wealth? Well, if you do it right, you're leaving not with your everything together, because it's distributed. So you're kind of like stuck in this weird thing, and it's not to say it's bad. It's just a reality. And then, so multi-institution lets you travel, lets you do all of it. But the reality is that you still have to have institutions. You still have to have them validate who you are. And so what I've increasingly been talking about, and, this is kind of how I think about it as well, is like, well, the best of both worlds in my mind is the barbell approach, where you have, and this is all different for everyone and how their percentage of what their risk profile exists. So people that are scared of their home being broken in and their families and all the things associated you reference, Cam, maybe somebody puts more into multi-institution because if they trust and understand the model. But then you still have what Bradley was saying is this component of, it's more of like a, 12, 24 wards with passphrase, redundancy on two different cold cards, two different ledgers, treasures. You have them distributed. If you ever have to leave, you can leave, your passphrase if TSA picks it up. But you always have that mobility of that bar of gold that you can always access. And then if nothing goes wrong, you still have the other firm that's sitting there, and you just kind of have a proportionate stack. And so you get to play both of those sides of the sovereignty of Bitcoin while also holding your wealth, all your family's wealth. And God forbid institution goes down, you still have the redundancy there. I've started to like pick that up, and that's really, clients like that. So anyway, just giving like kind of a framework, because as we start going to that world where this asset's hundreds of thousands of dollars and you have that setup, more people are going to be targeting, where the information is, and you want that air cover as well. That's why I think this is an important part of market structure, is like, it went from ledgers where people could break into people's house and say, hey, is it all here? Now you're like, I use collaborative custody, I don't have it all. Well, eventually that's not going to work. It's like, oh, I know you can get a piece of it all. It's like, well, I use multi-institution custody, I can't move it all. It takes 7 days for the next signature. So yeah.
Yeah. And to tack on to that, before we go to then IRA, Bradley, yeah, Cam, I think you're right that not your keys, not your coins was this battle of the past where that mantra emerged as a very helpful way to keep people from storing their Bitcoin on Mt. Gox or FTX or BlockFi. And so like if it's between this or that, you're much better off with self-custody. Like the collapses, the failures, the lost coins have disproportionately been in, centralized trusting of institutions entirely with your Bitcoin. And so that, that's where it all came from. And this model does feel like it flies in the face of that, because it's, you're not holding your keys. You're hiring professional key holders to hold, a one key out of a 2 of 3 quorum each. So in that way, you're not giving up unilateral control. And so I think this it's weird to say, but I think that not your keys, not your coins mantra was relevant and valid for the first 15 years of Bitcoin's existence. And it's still a good mantra with regard to the choice between third-party custody or self-custody. But the reality is there's now, because of multisig, there's now a new model of custody that's also in the landscape, multi-institution custody, where the trade-offs are different. And frankly, the risk mitigation, you mitigate almost all the risk of self-custody and almost all the risk of third-party custody, but you get the benefits of both. Most, namely the benefits of like you have control, because in self-custody you have control. In multi-institution custody, you're not giving up control, so you ultimately have control of your coins. And at the same time, you get to leverage the best practices of institutional key management, and BitGo and Onramp and CoinCover, whose businesses are built around this. And so it's a different model for a new era of Bitcoin. And this not your keys, not your coins is really, it was a helpful heuristic for a cypherpunk era. And not so relevant for, as we head into the mainstream of Bitcoin adoption, where it's like, are people more likely to do the 100 hours of learning necessary to really master self-custody, or are they just going to leave their coins on Coinbase or in an ETF? And, if that's how it will play out going forward, but the alternative is multi-institution custody, where they don't have to do 100 hours of research, but they get all these benefits. That's a winning model going forward. And so I chafe at not your keys, not your coins now, despite it being an excellent mantra for what it's designed for. It's just that now the practicalities of moving forward in Bitcoin's adoption necessitate considering other models, and multi-institution custody is the best of both worlds for self-custody and third-party custody.
Yeah, Michael, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, that was my soapbox, and we can move
No,
on
I
to.
think, well, it's a perfect segue. Like, I think the thing that even though we talk about this, been very careful to like quote unquote fear monger, because we have plenty of stories that are very scary, like for whether it's torture or whatever, from people's assets. The reason why we talk in the soapbox is warranted is because it's again, the futures here is not evenly distributed. At 120K and 150K, there's going to be a lot of very scary stories about people's houses being broken and crazy things happening. If I'm wrong, it's on tape and we'll see it. It's just inevitable, because when people hold that much wealth in their house, like, what do people do? They rob it. And so that's why I think it's important to articulate that, and so people to think about that. But then this could all be subjective. We could be wrong, all that. But what I think is objective, teeing it up to Bradley, is that I think this is objectively, I don't know how it could be disputed as the IRA for multi-institution for something, IRA and inheritance, because no exchange has lived 30 years. And if you're planning on, retiring in 30 years, well, you can't really trust a single entity, and no plastic device, no matter how great it is and how many secure elements it has existed for 30 years. And so if that's how you're going to plan for your inheritance or retirement, that's not a good strategy. And so
Well,
maybe up to Bradley for the IRA, because he gets excited about that one.
well, I think you just have to ask yourself again, if you think about like the things you plugged into a computer 30 years ago, probably a good example is like a zip drive would maybe be a bad example, but it's like in this example, that was an input method for computer was a zip drive. Like, if you had a zip drive today, would you know how to access that on a modern computer? Like, I don't know that maybe you could find one on Amazon. I'm not sure. But so if you think, okay, maybe I have an old 401k at a previous job, maybe I'm 35 and I have a 401k that's sitting with some entity that's got $25,000 in it. Maybe I had a good match, $30,000. I'd like to roll that into Bitcoin. That sounds great. So how do you do that? So today your options are maybe you can just buy one of the ETFs, and that's fine. That's an option. The downside of that today is there's going to be no way in the future to actually take delivery of that Bitcoin. Like, you would have to convert that to dollars. And again, who knows how that will evolve over the next 30 years? No idea. You could roll that into a situation where you had collaborative custody, where you would manage your own keys. That's an option. Again, the risk, same thing, like the risk of something happening technically and you losing access to that Bitcoin is it's real, and you are going to have to manage that over the next 30 years. So you're not going to be able to keep the same key. Like a hardware signing device that you have today is likely not going to survive for even the next 10 years. You will have to upgrade keys. You're going to have to replace the keys. You're going to have to do the key checks. Like that's actually a thing you can do. And if you want to do that, you can. I don't want to do that. And again, we're talking about specifically IRAs, old 401ks, and Roth IRAs. And just, again, I'm going to say all this. So if everybody listening at home is probably like, well, Bradley, everybody knows this. An IRA is a retirement account where you save for retirement today and you don't pay taxes on that income, but you will pay taxes on that when you start to take delivery of that in some sort of asset, dollars, for example. A 401k is similar to that, but it's through your your company. So again, if you have a self-directed 401k, you could buy an ETF or MSTR or however you want to do that. A Roth IRA is when you set it for yourself, and the key difference there is you can only set back a certain amount per year, but you pay taxes today, so you don't take any tax breaks today. But as it grows, so if you invest $100,000 into a Roth IRA and it grows to $1 million, you don't ever pay taxes again. So that's the beauty of it. But again, there's some income limits there. It's not financial advice. You can talk to your financial advisor. But again, so that's where if I said, hey, I've got an old 401k, it's got $50,000 in, I'm 35, I would like to have Bitcoin, the best Bitcoin exposure in that. That's where Onramp's new IRA product is perfect for you. It's holding real Bitcoin that you don't have to manage the keys yourself. You legally own the keys, but you don't have to manage the keys yourself. You can view it on chain, so you always know, like, hey, the company Onramp's dashboard says I have, say, 3 Bitcoin in this retirement account. I can view that on my own node. That's awesome. but you get the distributed control of having 3 different companies. So you're not having to just say trust one single entity, as Michael said. There's not, many companies don't last 30 years. They get bought, they get sold, they shut down, this, that, and the other. This way you don't have to trust one single entity. So it's really the best of every world. You get real Bitcoin, you can view it on your own node. You don't have to go through the technical hurdle of managing USB hardware signing devices or Bluetooth signing devices. You don't have to deal with that, but you actually own real Bitcoin and you can view it on your node. So to me, Onramp's new multi-institution custody IRA product is the best, and it's an industry-leading way to hold Bitcoin in retirement. It's the best properties of Bitcoin with the best properties of traditional finance merged together. And again, it's if you've got an old 401k sitting out there with insert random TradFi company, and you're like, hey, I want to hold real Bitcoin, roll it over to Onramp's new IRA product. It is the best product in the industry.
The IRA bull, Bradley Chambers delivers. No, it's a great point though, just because everyone on this call, and I would assume most of the listeners of the podcast, all view Bitcoin as a multi-generational pursuit. And we have time horizons that are 10, 20, 30 years. And the existing custody options, we've already talked about it. It's very challenging to find a counterparty that will actually be reputable and be there for you when you need it, let alone give you transparency to know that the Bitcoin is actually there, right? Because if you're trusting a centralized exchange, you're holding your Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is being held in a large pool of Bitcoin with all the other clients. And depending on what exchange you're working with, some are much better than others. Like River stands out as an excellent business in the Bitcoin only space. But there are many other exchanges that you don't really have transparency into how those assets are being held. And we've already lived through, most recently 2022, there's no shortage of issues with centralized exchange failures. And the flip side of that is, well, how will I manage a retirement where I actually have to manage the keys myself? I need to be performing key checks very regularly. I need to be checking multiple geographic locations. Is that really scalable for an asset that you want to own for the next 1, 2, or 3 decades? So I am quite excited about this personally, just having the IRA announcement go out earlier this week. And I do agree with you, Bradley, just in terms of people wanting to take advantage of tax-advantaged accounts and own an asset that they already understand very deeply and understand the investment thesis for the next 30 years, having a solution to actually protect that and not have a single point of failure and having redundancy is very important.
Yeah, Cam, curious, throwing it to you because I know you said you were a normie and then you referenced to being on a Bitcoin standard. So you kind of like you're maybe the normie in your here, but in your friend group, you're the Bitcoin bull. And I know you actively are trying to help them see the vision of preserving their wealth in a better form of money. Um, this feels for them, but for everyone, like a great solution for at least even an entry point, because a lot of the tax advantage money is like thought of as like not personal funds, right? So it's like already there. So people like that as a first entrance into the space. But ultimately, like there's multiple levels to counterparty risk. We've already hit enough on the custody. There's the level of counterparty risk on the debasement and purchasing power from all of these other assets that are in tax advantage accounts. So people are assuming the S&P, NASDAQ, however they're allocating for their retirement is just going to always go up and to the right when we know like structurally they're losing their wealth. And just curious like how you think about that, and less about the IRA, just more of like kind of curious what's going on in your circles with the price appreciation and if anything's changed since we've last talked.
Yeah, I think I've had 3 or 4 conversations the last week with friends that want to roll over IRAs. Like that's uh, the ETFs are making that such an easy answer. Like I'm now like I used to be like, don't get the the ETFs. Like actually go buy native Bitcoin, and this is how you do it. I've done that so many times. I know that it just doesn't happen. Like I'm to the point now where I just want people to have exposure to the price. Um, and so this is the timing for this IRA product with Onramp's perfect, because I think, just anecdotally last week I've had 4 people ask about it. How do I roll over, an IRA into Bitcoin? And so that's happening. I think, in the venture world, it's so funny. I think I said this in the last time. Venture is going to be ironically the last group of people to get Bitcoin, because none of the incentives play into the general partnership. Like you can't, it's very difficult to charge fees on something that anybody in the world has access to. The carry on, like they will be last to it because the incentives with venture capital are not aligned with this thing that anyone in the world has access to. That said, and I've mentioned this, in our next fund, I'm very seriously considering allocating a portion of Bitcoin, and being very upfront with potential LPs during our next raise for our next fund, because essentially what I'm going to say is you have 15 years of evidence that this thing grows at a 58% CAGR or whatever. If you believe that, not even like believe in what Bitcoin's going to do, but if you believe in what every other fiat currency in the world is going to do, i.e. debase, this is the surest bet that you can make over the next decade. And so a 10% allocation to something like Bitcoin essentially takes the 0x risk out of venture capital and allows me to play with 90% of the dry ammo that I would have had. But like that 10% allocation held for 10 or 12 years, could get me well past a 1x in the fund. And the reason that big LPs, sort of throttle their allocation of venture capital is because of the risk of putting money with a fund manager that ends up not returning capital, which is 50% of all venture funds don't even return 100% of capital. So that's the risk in venture. So this new model, what does that look like? Well, okay, if you can guarantee that you're going to, return me all of my principal, and I'm playing with house money now, that's a major differentiator in venture. I've had this conversation with probably 8 or 10 VCs, and they just don't get it because they don't understand Bitcoin yet. For the most part, there are a few people that do get it. I said this on a panel that I did with you guys in Nashville at the Bitcoin conference this year. I was at an all-in summit. We've backed a number of Jason Calacanis's deals, and we're close with their team, and so we went out to Napa for a summit, and they did a live filming of an all-in, him and Shmoff and David Sachs, and at the end of it, I got to spend some time one-on-one with I won't say who, but one of those, one of the folks in the in that trio, and I was like, what's funny to me is I look out on this crowd. And, I'm looking at a bunch of GPs and a bunch of LPs. Every single one of these people are saying, we are investing in world-changing companies. That is the mantra of venture capital. And I was like, what's funny to me is it's actually not true. It doesn't matter how many great companies we build and back. If we maintain a positive inflation rate and the dollar continues to debase, everyone's lives just keep getting harder on a fully blended basis. We're contributing a little bit to that, but all of our gains are just getting stolen from us. And it's just funny that that's the thing about venture capital. We invest in, world-changing companies, but none of these people actually understand what Bitcoin is, which would actually allow them to pull that off. And he grabbed me and pulled me in almost face to face, and he's looks out and he's like, yeah, none of these people understand that yet. And so a few people in venture get it. I have the feeling that most of these folks know that they kind of have this, space cornered, and there's more juice in this lemon to squeeze. And I don't want to kill the golden goose that's feeding me and my family. I'm just going to keep playing this thing until I know when the time comes, a lot of this stuff's going to change on, how we do business, but not yet. And that's kind of the feeling that I get with the folks that are smart to Bitcoin, are just kind of yeah, I know you're there, I'll address it when I absolutely have to.
Yeah, it's an amazing anecdote. It's kind of timely too, because last week they came out and what was it, Chamath that said it's, the best inflation hedge for the next 50 to 100 years. Jesse, you'll love this because I haven't shared this, and the person reached out, let me know that I could say it without naming the names. On one of the last pods, we were talking about early riders and the Bitcoin denominated fund, and this founder raised in 2020 AI company, pretty like kind of really blowing up, put Bitcoin in its balance sheet in 21, and the investor found out and just kind of lost it, completely lost it. So changed their docs for, I believe, all future investments, but is also threatening to sue unless they divest of the position. And I had reached out to Cam about this earlier in the week, saying just like, can you believe this? And obviously he called just to like, I don't know, confide. Like we had a consultation and we're just talking about it. And also it's personal. He was like, hey, this is interesting for my personal. I was like, you're talking to the wrong person about this because like I would not sell. I was like, let's work, because he went and found, got legal um uh legal opinion, whatever. And it's like he hasn't broken any covenants, he's not in any derivatives, right? He's not speculating. And he didn't know what to do, and he needs to get out of this position by the end of the year. And where I commend Cam for thinking about this, and hopefully you can get to be able to do this, is because it's implying not only are you returning more capital by holding a better form of money, I don't see how that doesn't permeate to your investments. Because naturally, again, the game has changed with the inflation, that unless companies have some exposure or look at the world through the lens that we understand, they're already like moving backwards. They're think about inflation persisting and having to hire and having to think about margins. Like you're already going like hands tied behind your back. And so I think this is why like there should only be a small amount of venture firms. There should only be amount of like, this is why investing is hard, because it's the opposite of what everyone's doing. So everybody's in that room looking at the market like this, and you got to be looking at it a different way, because that's what investing is. Similar to Bitcoin, right? Nobody's looking at it yet. Nobody's paying attention. So anyway, it's just a very interesting paradigm like that. There, and when he was explaining this to me, I don't know if this was what influenced this investor, because it was like the main guy at this large, it's a very large firm, and they went and like amended all their docs for all future investments to explicitly say they cannot put like this underlying asset on their balance sheet. But what it kind of implied, whether this guy meant it or not, was that it kind of disrupts their model, because if he's looking at them needing to raise and mark it up, right, on the next round and taking more dilution, their company dilutes, versus now they just extended their runway because they just like their treasury is like loaded. They're just sitting there like, and he's thinking about it, giving more discernment. They've been more efficient because they're thinking about it through the Bitcoin lens. And this isn't like hardcore Bitcoin. It's just a guy that put it on their balance sheet. It changes the whole model of venture. And again, it goes back to there's going to be a select people that reap the rewards, because it's just, this is what investing is. You got to be different than the market.
Yep. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I that's an interesting point that you just brought up. It is actually um, a headwind for investors, multi-stage funds that want to continue to invest, in teams that have to come back to the well, right? Like they, once you get into real big money, you're not dealing with like seed investors that just have positive intent for the founders. And like, obviously, like you want return for the fund and you're playing the power law with venture. But like later on, it gets really dog eat dog, and these firms are like have to get allocation in their winners. And if a lot of their winners, start just being able to fund their operations through their own, their own balance sheet, and obviously that's not good for venture investors. So like, yeah, like this is just like the hints of how venture is going to start to change, in the future. That is going to be interesting to follow. If it comes out, if Bitcoin goes to 3, 4, 500K this cycle, like I don't know what I would do in that situation, but I may say, look, how serious are you about this? Because, we have real conviction in this asset. And, if this ends up being a bad decision for us as a company, nothing distinct were in our terms, that we signed when you financed the deal, in the beginning. If this is just something you're trying to push us out of doing, we will, this is going to be fun going to the press to say, like, we divested out of Bitcoin like right before a bull market because, a venture investor wasn't comfortable with our decision making as an operating team.
Yeah, and this is like a symptom. We all know probably like here and then listening like the amount of clown world and the incentive models, but like this just like brings it home. You like the notion of investing is for the outcome to be positive, so you can get a return on capital, and to have positive, the person needs to deliver value. And so, what way to deliver value then? Use your expertise to bring it to the world, but instead you want the person to spend every 18 months having to raise more money versus just their capital base growing and then delivering value to the world. Is like you're doing the opposite. You're asking for the requiring the opposite. Like that's just how bad the incentive model has been with this like system. And this is just like one micro example of it.
Yeah, I know we're getting up on time. Cam, you just mentioned in passing, where is Bitcoin going this cycle? We are at the last day of October, and I think we're at about 12 or 13% for the month because Bitcoin is tanking a little bit today. We're at about 70,000 while we're recording. Have to call on the resident halving and Bitcoin macro analyst Jesse to just maybe paint a picture of what does the next 6 to 12 months look like. Are things kind of playing out as you expected 12 months ago, let's say start of the year?
Yeah, sure. That's fun. Yeah, so as you know, Jackson, I did a presentation at MIT the day after the halving, kind of walking through my perspective on Bitcoin's mechanics, price mechanics, and how that's all driven by supply and demand. And the halving, in my opinion, is the catalyst that triggers a post-halving bull market every 4 years. And what I tried to emphasize in that talk, and it recently made the rounds again because of this, is that it takes 6 months post-halving where nothing happens, but on the surface. But under the surface, that supply shortage of half as much Bitcoin being released into the market every day from new supply issuance, that supply shortage accumulates and chips away at available for sale supply, to a point where the market, incoming demand, has to try to find new supply. And the only way to do that is to start bidding up. So the price starts to drift upwards somewhere around 6 months post-halving. And so in my mind, that starts the flywheel of action for a post-halving bull market where the price starts to drift upwards, people get excited, more demand comes in, price starts to drift upwards more quickly, and that just kind of flywheels into a mania. So a bubble forms after every halving, and it takes 12 to 18 months for that bubble to pop. That's what we've seen over previous cycles. So right now we're 6 months post-halving. Now is when I would expect the price to start to move upwards. That's what happened 4 years ago. 4 years ago, people forget that going into the election, the price of Bitcoin, the month before the election, the price of Bitcoin went from like 10,000 to 13,000. And then 6 months later, it was 64,000. And we're at that point in time, I think, right now for this cycle. So, and it's hard to believe that. It's hard to imagine what can happen very quickly once that flywheel gets going. But I think earlier this year, what we saw immediately after the ETFs were launched is a great indicator of what can and I think will happen once that price drifting upwards sort of catches on with people who are not yet Bitcoin holders, right? Like right now, there's no interest from outside of the crypto community in Bitcoin right now. The Google search volume for buy Bitcoin is very low, and people start to take interest once the price breaks above the prior all-time high, and it keeps moving, and that's when people who are on the sidelines just start to feel more and more pressure of shit. I have to get in. I have to buy. Maybe I should. I don't want to miss another bull market. I just got to jump in and be a part of this. And we'll see that, I think, with the ETFs in particular this cycle, because when the price was running Q1 this year, after the ETFs were launched, ETF incoming volume was tremendous. And I think that just shows that ETF buyers are reflexive in the same way that all of us, every Bitcoin buyer is reflexive. They buy more when the price is going up. And the faster it's going up, the more demand there is. So, I expect that'll kind of take shape as the price drifts up. And I think we'll be looking at a 2025 where, maybe it's 12 months post-halving, maybe it's 18 months post-halving. So sometime second half of the year, where I think we'll end up with a price peak. I'm sort of trying to remain conservative here and bracing for maybe it's 150K, but maybe it's 250K. And it's quite possible if things get crazy, if there's some sort of geopolitical move beyond what we've seen so far, that it could go above 250K. Like 350K is not out of the realm of possibility, but I think that everybody's a little bit complacent right now because having 6 months passed, nothing's happened, but now is the time to be most excited about what's coming.
Do you think in your model, would it help if a future president, were to tweet happy, wish our great Bitcoiners a happy 16th anniversary of Satoshi's white paper. We will end Kamal's war on crypto and Bitcoin will be made in the USA, vote Trump, because
Wow.
he happened to just post that.
Well, and you think too,
Wow.
back when the price was this way in 2021, interest rates were still basically, zero, and they're going to start to rise. The entry point for most people getting into Bitcoin was an FTX or a Celsius. It was an exchange. And so today you're looking at, we're entering into an easing cycle. And then the entry point is probably going to be IBIT and FBTC for a lot of traditional investors. And you hope that gets them on their journey to understanding Bitcoin as a technology, as an asset class, and not just an ETF. And so I don't know how high will the price go. It all depends on demand. The price will rise until there are sellers, and I'm going to keep buying until people stop selling it.
I love it. Yeah, and we can wrap here, but just one quick data point to throw out was that IBIT yesterday had nearly $1 billion of inflows. It was 875 million. I think between yesterday and the day before, those 2 days of inflows were more than the gold ETFs in their entire first year. So it is a pretty exciting time to be in the market and paying attention to Bitcoin. Want to be respectful of the group's time because we just went over, but Cam and Bradley, appreciate you coming on. Cam, is there somewhere people could get in touch with you if they're curious to learn more about Brickyard?
Yeah, if you're interested in Brickyard, that's at justlaybrick.com, and we're pretty explicit about what we do and how we invest. I think that could be cool to kind of thumb through. And then Twitter is kind of where I am most active, and that's Cam Doody, just at Cam Doody.
Thanks, Cam. And Bradley, thank you for joining as well. Any last words here?
I'm going to give a plug for the Brickyard as a local resident. Cam's been really good for our city, and we need more people like Cam in Chattanooga as a born, someone that was born here. And Brickyard is, I'm pretty proud that it's here in Chattanooga. And so thank you, Cam, for choosing to live here. Again, check out Onramp's new IRA. Go to onrampbitcoin.com. There's a button on the homepage. It is the best IRA product. If you've got 30K sitting in a old 401k, you need to roll that to Bitcoin that you can verify on your own node with multi-institution custody. So that's at onrampbitcoin.com.
Thank you, gentlemen. Really a pleasure to have you on today. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. If you found the information valuable, please share the episode with a friend or leave a rating on your favorite podcast app. All the links we discussed in today's show will be in the show notes inside your podcast app. Before we finish, a quick reminder that Onramp Media is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment or legal advice. Regardless of where you are on your Bitcoin journey, we'd love to hear from you. Visit onrampbitcoin.com/contact to schedule a consultation with one of our private client advisors.